What if the greatest mystery of our time isn't just what's in the sky, but what's inside us? For decades, government has denied it. Whistleblowers have risked everything to expose it, and humanity has asked the question since the beginning of time: are we alone? Well, today, we're going deeper than sightings and secrets, but we're going into consciousness, non-human intelligence, and what may be the biggest revelation in human history. My guest today is award-winning investigative journalist, best-selling author of In Plain Sight, and one of the most trusted voices in the UAP conversation. From NewsNation, Ross Coulthart. This is not science fiction. This is not speculation, but this is Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, the one and only Ross Coulthart. Well, look at this handsome man that all the way, well, I don't even know if you're in Australia because you're all over the world. So Ross, welcome to the show.
G'day, Tony. Good to meet you and good to meet your audience.
Now, where are you located now? Are you in Australia?
I'm in country New South Wales, about an hour and a half outside Sydney, south of Sydney, on the road to Canberra, which is our capital city. Living in rolling green hills, keeping as far away from the big city as possible.
Well, I mean, it sounds beautiful, so I hope it is. And I'm excited to have you here, not only today for the first time, which I can't believe that it's the first time on my show, but coming up in February at the Conscious Life Expo, guess who's going to be there? Yes, Ross is going to be talking about the deeper answers, the UAP mystery, Saturday, February 21st in La Jolla Room from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Get your tickets now because it saves you a little money, and I'm sure it's going to sell out. So this man works with NewsNation and just best-selling author. I mean, you can't get any better than Mr. Ross here. But I do want to jump right in because I know we're limited time with you and I appreciate it. But I mean, you've had this extraordinary career investigating like from government secrecies and intelligent matters and histories of this amazing world with deep mysteries from all over the world. But what stands out for me is the UAPs that you have put this amazing book together in plain sight. But I want to know, what is the most compelling evidence that you have come to a conclusion? Because this, I know it's kind of, the answer should be at the end, but what is this answer or this evidence that humanity's oldest question, are we alone?
Look, for me, Tony, it's very difficult because as a journalist, I talk to an enormous number of people who will only speak to me off the record and on deep background. And the most persuasive evidence for me are the people that I talk to. Obviously, you'd know David Grush, the former National Geospatial Intelligence Agency official who I was talking to for quite a long time before he went public in June of 2023 with me on national TV on NewsNation in the US. There's Jake Barber, who went public with me in January last year, 2025. And he gave direct first-hand evidence of his knowledge of the retrieval operations involving non-human technology. But behind the scenes, there are an array of incredibly brave, decent, kind, intellectually engaged people who are very strongly of the view that the public has a right to know what they're telling me, which is that, yes, there is this incredible secret that's been kept from the world for a minimum of 80 years, that there is retrieved non-human technology that, yes, incredible as it may sound, there is a non-human intelligence, NHI, engaging with this planet, to the knowledge of some of the governments of this world, most notably Russia, the US, China, the Brits, the French, and the Israelis, and I suspect a couple of others. And this is a secret that's been kept, I think, improperly, if not illegally, from the knowledge of the public, certainly of Congress. And there are probably billions of dollars of US taxpayers' money which has been spent on attempting to reverse engineer this technology, and it raises a really interesting question of accountability, transparency, oversight by the Congress of executive power in the United States. The fact that presidents have not been briefed in, that senior officials in the Defense Department, in many cases, are serving careers oblivious to the existence of this legacy program. So for me, the best evidence are the people that I talk to. You know some of them publicly, but there are people that I talk to almost on a daily basis who are inside the legacy program, people who operate at the highest levels of the Defense Department, the intelligence community, the private aerospace community, and they strongly believe there is no good reason for the public not to know, that it would be, I think, a transitional moment, a pivot moment for the planet once human beings become aware of the existence of a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet. And those people are the silent heroes, the quiet whistleblowers, the people that I credit the most with helping me over the line from firm skeptic to a person who can say, I think quite categorically, that I know this is real.
Excuse me, I have a cold, so if my voice goes in and out, that's why. But what I find fascinating is you've said, presidents get briefed on it, but they don't necessarily get the full information. And I'm curious if this is true across all nations of who gets briefed and who does not, because I remember interviewing just about a month ago James Fox about the Brazil encounter, and lo and behold, the United States came down and took not only the ship but also the alien, the extraterrestrial. And I'm wondering if there's a bigger group of people that is more of a worldwide agency that are all connected, where the leaderships that we feel are the top people of each country are not getting this facts. What is your thoughts on that?
Let me be very careful how I answer this one, Tony. Anything I say here is speculative, but reasonably well informed. Okay, I do believe there is a control group, and I do believe that it's a coalition of individuals. Probably most of them are in private aerospace, major aerospace companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing. And I think what's happened is it's largely privatized an effort that was happening inside the US government for a long time. Certainly, I'm aware of, I get little circumstantial whiffs of stuff. I've spoken to soldiers who've served as tier one operators, elite operators at the top of their country's military, including men here in Australia, who tell me they've been involved in retrievals of what they believe was non-human technology. I've spoken to people who say that there is a control group that monitors and actively gets involved in retrievals of non-human tech. And these retrievals are allegedly happening all the time. I don't get the impression that there is this kind of MJ12 type organization twiddling the knobs and pushing the buttons to essentially control everything. I think they're losing influence and control, and I think that certainly for my country, Australia, I'm very confident that most of the ministers in our government, certainly not prime ministers, I've spoken to a few of them, are completely oblivious. They kind of giggle nervously when I ask them about the subject. But I think there's been a couple of data points I've had in my own country, Australia, where it's become very clear to me that, as happens in the United States, there are a trusted, safe pair of hands, if you like, in the Defense Department or maybe in the intelligence community, who've been given a polite wink and a nod and told certain things. I've covered a story that I'm still putting together and investigating involving, for example, an Australian military photographer who was ordered by his bosses to do a job for the Americans. And as far as he knows, his bosses didn't have any idea what the Americans were borrowing him for. And one of the things that has characterized my career as a journalist is in covering intelligence matters, I realized how much America, and to a lesser degree the Brits, use Australians, Canadians and New Zealanders, who are the kind of junior partners of the so-called Five Eyes Alliance, the Yakuza Agreement. They use us to do plausibly deniable favours. So if US personnel or military personnel aren't involved in doing the retrieval directly, it gives them a degree of deniability if they can avoid it by using Australians or Brits or Canadians or New Zealanders. And so I've become privy to the fact, as happened with this photographer. Literally, a US Air Force plane landed at Darwin Airport. This guy hopped on. He had no idea where he was going. And he was taken to an area of jungle in Southeast Asia where he was involved in photographing a craft that had either crashed or landed in the jungle. And that craft was in the process of being retrieved by American military personnel. He photographed it. His photography was supervised. The film was developed, and the negatives and the photographs, the developed photographs, were all taken off him under close supervision. And then he was actually paid cash and ordered not to report to his bosses what he had seen and done. And it's funny, it sounds implausible, this,
right.
But this is a feature of stuff that I've covered in the intelligence community for many years. I did a story for the public broadcaster, a show called Four Corners, back in 1994. So that's, 31 years ago. And I exposed how Australian spies were used by the Brits to bug the officers of the Kuwaiti government after the first Gulf War in 1991. And the reason for that was that the Brits were trying to win contracts for the rebuilding of Kuwait after the Saddam Hussein invasion. And incredibly, it meant that Australian spies were unwittingly involved in helping the British win contracts against Australian companies for the rebuilding of Kuwait, because these guys, and I met some of them, they were ordered not to reveal to their Australian bosses what they'd done in Kuwait. And this is how it's done inside the Five Eyes Alliance. Wow. Each side borrows each other's clever people who can do all sorts of things like bugging and tapping and basic spying. And it provides the other side with implausible deniability. And there was another one I did where a guy called Mike Frost, who was a spy who worked for the Canadian Secret Service, the Secret Intelligence Service. I think it's CSE or something. Mike was flown to London, and Margaret Thatcher wanted to know who was leaking stories to the media that were embarrassing her. And so he bugged her entire cabinet's phones.
Oh, my gosh.
And essentially it meant that the British had deniability, that there was no possibility that they could be accused of using their own personnel to tap the other cabinet ministers, which was a horrendously politically sensitive thing to do. But this is the way the intelligence world operates, and it's the way the intelligence world operates with the dirty secret of UAPs. You know, there are personnel from each other's countries that are used to provide plausible deniability. It's why the Israelis are involved as well. I suspect the Israelis have been involved in retrievals in the Middle East. And so, yes, to answer your question in a short way, I do believe there is a control group. I don't think it's as clever an organisation as it would like to think it is, because it's leaking prodigiously like a sieve at the moment. And there are a lot of people within the legacy program, both in the US and the UK, who believe very strongly that the public has a right to know about it. And that's why I honestly think, you know, it's kind of silly, really. I think it's inevitable that at some stage in the next years, I've got really no idea, it might even be months, I've got no idea. At some stage, there's going to be a catastrophic disclosure. And Donald Trump, as the new administration of his presidency, would be, I think, well advised to make a decision about disclosure, because it's becoming untenable. The degree of leaking to people like myself, there are more David Grushes and Jake Barbers out there, and they're getting increasingly strident and concerned that there is this ongoing lying and cover-up, deceiving the world about the knowledge of a non-human intelligence, and they don't think there's any good reason for concealing it.
I think right now we're in a moment where, like a pressure cooker, for the last, almost 80 years, that the hidden information that majority of us in our realm know that exist, it's getting ready to blow, and I feel like that's very soon. When I've talked to James Fox and I've talked to Stephen, oh gosh, can't even think of his name right at the moment, but
Stephen Greer.
Stephen Greer, yes. That disclosure I feel is very close, because I don't think they can hold this information back much longer.
But also, it's more than that. I genuinely, as a journalist, I often get told things by people in defense or intelligence that I shouldn't know.
They just can't keep the secret, huh?
Well, no, what I do is I try and make a judgment about what I should reveal, because it's not like these people are being reckless, but they often don't realize how much I know and how much telling me one thing allows me to know a whole lot more. Right. And basically, people talk. Humans talk. They share information. It's part of being a community that, they impart information. And secrets, especially dirty, smelly secrets, have a way of wriggling to the surface. And just to echo your comments there, I think it is inevitable that the story will get out. But more importantly, it should be a policy decision at the highest levels of government that if they want to avoid, I think, a catastrophic disclosure, they really do need to urgently think about addressing some kind of limited public disclosure. I can understand if, for example, God forbid, if we are trying to weaponize the technology that we've obtained from these NHI, which I'm pretty sure the NHI don't want us to do. But if we are trying to weaponize it, a bit like nuclear weapons, we don't need to know, you and I, how to make a thermonuclear bomb. But we can know that a thermonuclear bomb exists, and we can know that there is a whole control system for the use of those weapons. And it's important that we do know that, because, frankly, the future of the human race sits in the balance about the misuse of those weapons. In the same way, I do think that a limited disclosure to the extent of, yes, we are not alone. Yes, there is an intelligent being or beings that's engaging with this planet. And to a limited extent, giving us some kind of a briefing about what they know, I think it's very important. And I just think we're at a point now where it is becoming untenable for governments to maintain the position of heads in the sand. And I can tell you, as a journalist, I'm genuinely concerned about the possibility that Russia or China might steal the march on us in terms of, potential adversaries seeking to weaponize technology that we are, as I understand it, currently struggling to do anything with. And I think, the very thing that makes America and the free world, the Western world, the best place to live in on the planet, is the free and open sharing and transparency with information. And here we have a situation where, frankly, we are concealing this most incredible secret, the biggest secret of all. And we're flatly deceived and gaslit and lied to by governments. And I worry most of all, the reason why they don't want to reveal it is because it'd be a betrayal of trust. It'd show how much they've lied to the public.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could work both ways. If you disclose, then it would show that we can trust you with information that we've already known it's happened, but we feel that you finally are opening up to the community, but also like, oh, you've been lying to us this long. What can we trust you about? So one thing I do want to talk, we've talked a lot about technology and even just disclosure, but you had the opportunity to speak with intelligence insiders like Jake Barber. But not necessarily just the craft and the technology, but also hiding our own abilities, which I really find that fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about that, like telepathic contact? Could UAPs encounter be less about technology and more about like consciousness?
That's absolutely fundamental and key to how my investigations are going at the moment, Tony.
That's great.
I actually started out very early in my research for my book, arrogantly thinking that I was going to debunk this UFO nonsense. I'm a journalist that's worked in national security, defense, and I've got a lot of sources in air forces and aerospace. And I just arrogantly assumed when I first started writing my book that what I was going to find at the end of this rainbow was evidence that this was some kind of black program, some covert program run by the Americans in collusion with other Five Eyes nations, developing a new type of aircraft or space plane or something like that. Instead, what I've slowly over the years come to realize is that often a lot of the people in defense are as completely in the dark as you and I are about what this phenomenon is. And it's not necessarily a nuts and bolts phenomenon. The accounts that I've had from people of these craft is that quite often, for example, the eggs, the sort of ovoid-shaped objects, that craft that have been recovered that were alluded to in my interview with Jake Barber, when they've opened those objects, what they find inside is a completely empty sphere.
Wow.
It's a completely empty object. And they discovered that the only way, this is what I'm told, is that the only way they can operate these craft, if that's what they actually are, is using the human mind, training humans who are already known to be gifted with telepathic or psionic or psychical abilities, training them how to essentially coordinate the two hemispheres of the brain in a way that allows them to tap into a consciousness field that allows them to operate that technology. And this all sounded a bit wacky when I first looked at it. But then if you go back through the history of ufology, I'm fascinated by the story of Dan Sherman, who wrote a book called Above Black. And Dan relates how, as a young man in the Air Force, he was trained how to essentially dissociate his brain and to connect with a higher consciousness, some kind of external consciousness, using alleged what we call psionic abilities. And I think there's absolutely a link between consciousness, psionics, telepathics, psychical phenomena, and the technology, if it is a technology, that we call UAPs or non-human technology. I think it's a lot more complex than just mechanical nuts and bolts. And I think the US is wrestling with the implications of this, because the thing I find intriguing is the more I get into this subject, and it's one of the reasons why I'm interested in participating in the Conscious Life Expo. A lot of people said to me, "Oh, it's a bit woo, it's a bit crystal gazy, bit too many people with flowers in their hair and sandals on their feet." And the fascinating thing is, what this whole story leads one to, without sounding crazy, is a spiritual discovery, a consciousness investigation. One finds oneself going down the rabbit hole of even the fact that people who purport to be in touch with non-human intelligence, they say that humanity is at a tipping point, a transcendent moment in human history where if we do want to advance, we have to learn how to love. And it sounds like a complete counterculture hippie nonsense, but
it's pretty powerful,
ultimately the tipping point will only happen if we humans learn how to resolve our differences, become aware of our enormous capabilities through human consciousness, and then and only then can we ascend to allegedly the knowledge that will be imparted to us by the NHI. Now, that all sounds, I know, I can almost hear the debunkers scoffing, and frankly, I don't give a fuck. The bottom line is they should do the investigations I've done. We are inevitably, in the course of investigating UAPs, going on a journey into spiritual ideas, the origins of humanity, the purpose of our human existence on this planet, and investigating what human consciousness is. Are we just meat computers?
Mm-hmm.
Does our consciousness, is it really is consciousness just a myth? Is our free will a complete nonsense? And is it really just a chance activation of an intelligence that thinks it's conscious, that is operating within a biological meat computer? And does it die with our bodies? What intrigues me are the number of people who are, for example, experiencers, people who claim contact with UAPs, I think in a very convincing way. And so many of them have had near-death experiences. I was talking to somebody just the other day, a very dear friend, who imparted to me that they'd had a near-death experience themselves when they were a young man, and then they started having all of this weird phenomena happen to them where they were encountering UAPs. And does the experience of being close to death in some way bring us closer to the phenomenon?
What you're talking about, I feel, this is how I feel, I could be completely wrong, but Avatar, I feel like this is kind of what UAPs are doing. They're going into these hyper chambers, and consciousness is going into this another being where they can interact with a new world. I don't know if you've seen Avatar, but it just reminds me of that.
I couldn't help but see it. One of my daughters is an absolutely mad fan of Avatar. I think it's jumped the shark in its most recent iterations, but I loved the first two films. And the thing about that film is it's exploring ideas. The other one I love is Arrival.
That's a great one.
Essentially, it's suggesting that our whole idea of space and time is completely based on a flawed idea that essentially there is no space and time. That essentially we are part of a universe, and that what we are experiencing, past, present, and future, is all one thing. It's all connected. And it's really interesting because that's one thing that Ben Rich from Lockheed Martin Skunk Works admitted when he was asked about it by Jan Harzen all those years ago, after he'd given a lecture in California to a group of people interested in the UAP subject. And, essentially Ben concurred with the proposition that everything is connected in time and space. And ultimately that would explain the capacities of human consciousness if what we're talking about here is real. If human brains really can tap externally into a consciousness field that is more accurately what we are, that we are essentially spirits that are part of a field of consciousness that represents all space and time, that would explain a lot about what we're experiencing on this planet. And one of the things that I find most intriguing, Tony, I have no way of validating it or proving it, is a lot of people who engage with what we call NHI, non-human intelligence, they say that they're often told that what we're here for on this planet is to experience both pain, suffering, love, and heightened emotions, in order to imbue that consciousness with an understanding of the universe. And maybe that's what we are. Maybe Earth is just an experiential event for the souls that we are. But certainly I've come a long way in 7 years.
I bet.
I've gone from being a hard-nosed investigative reporter who's covering wars in war zones and, investigating corruption and true crime, and finding myself talking about spiritual ideas like a unitary consciousness field. And I've been pushed that way by the people that I talk to. It's impossible to avoid. I think if you just look at UFOs, UAPs in the context of, little green-eyed aliens with tentacles from planet Zug, I think you're missing the point that this is a phenomenon that transcends the simple notion of being aliens. It's interdimensional, as David Grush has described to me in my interview with him. It's something that is possibly at the heart of explaining not only are we alone, but do we survive death? What happens to us after we die, and why are we here? I think it's probably the answer to some of the most fundamental mysteries that we have at all, and I'm excited by it because, as a young man living in the latter 20th and then early 21st century, as an older bloke, I think one of the things that is quite sad is the way that, as a result of the kind of Descartesian view of the universe, we've developed this idea in science that the only thing that we should look at is rational empirical data that is based on observable, visible phenomena. And that we should ignore spiritual ideas and religious ideas and philosophical concepts because they can't be proven one way or the other. And I worry that what René Descartes did was essentially irrevocably split us from something that I think is fundamental to an understanding of what we are as humans, that we need to embrace the spiritual. And dare I say, we need to learn how to love because, here we are, you and I are talking at a time when there's a counter-revolution breaking out in Iran.
Everywhere.
We've got a war in Ukraine. We've, had an invasion of Venezuela.
Yeah.
We're seeing quite unprecedented internecine conflict all over the globe. It's very hard not to be extremely pessimistic about the future of humanity. And here we have, I think, this secret which has been improperly withheld from the public, which I think might very well provide us with answers that could lead humanity into a completely new direction.
But don't you think, and maybe you have said this before, but the question, are you alone? Maybe it should be, what are we a part of?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's what I'm trying to suggest is that I'm increasingly of the view, what certainly attracts me is the way that science, people like Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose. I attended a conference in Spain where both men spoke in May last year, and they were talking about the idea that human consciousness doesn't reside in the brain, that essentially the brain is an attenuator, it's a receiver, and possibly also a transmitter, and that essentially what's happening is we're tapping into a field. And I'm fascinated by the fact that a lot of scientists and creative people that I talk to, I've learned to ask them, where did that great idea come from that gave you the Nobel Prize? And it's astonishing how often when I talk to them, they'll say to me, well, it actually came in a dream or in a download.
Wow.
And how many writers and musicians tell me that the beautiful piece of writing or the emotionally gorgeous piece of music that they've written, it came to them in a dream or in a moment of revelation, intuitive insight, and they can't adequately explain what it was that gave them that knowledge. Could it be that what happens is, after a certain period of expertise, humans develop the ability to, in a dream state, tap into that field of consciousness and draw on that knowledge? And could that explain where some of the great ideas and discoveries have come from? Or could it even be more interesting? Are we being seeded by some kind of super being with ideas and essentially being fed ideas through consciousness? It fascinates me, and it also frustrates me because I just wish. I mean, I studied yoga for 27 years before I started getting arthritic joints, and I really wish, rather than learning how to play rugby or football, I'd started doing yoga and meditation as an 8-year-old kid. And wouldn't the world be an interesting place if children learned how to meditate, if they learned how to apply this consciousness and how to tap into this consciousness field? I have a really strong sense that, yes, there is a non-human intelligence. It's a lot more complex and a lot more exciting and interesting than we realize, because at the heart of it is the answers to the fundamental mystery, not only of are we alone, but why are we here? What is our purpose? What are we humans on this planet for? What purpose do we serve? I think that the whole thing is actually tied up in a bow. By finding the answer to one, you unlock the answer to the other.
I mean, even Billie Eilish put a song out and says, "What was I made for?" I mean, I think every human asks that same question almost every day, if not every other day. And but why do you think consciousness, the topic of consciousness, is still avoided by not just the mainstream, but even people in our own genre of the UAP or ufology? Is it because it's too destabilizing, or is it just because of the hype of Hollywood? Why do you think that is?
I actually think things are changing. I mean, I probably because I'm receptive to it, because I cover it as a journalist.
Right.
I'm certainly seeing a change in terms of media receptivity. Like the conference that I went to in Barcelona in Spain on consciousness last year. There were people there who were like Professor Stu Hammeroff and Sir Roger Penrose, who were talking about this idea of a non-local consciousness. And I was just reading yesterday, I think MIT, one of the most prestigious universities in the world, there are scientists using transcranial focused ultrasound to stimulate the brain and see how it functions. And they're already beginning to develop an idea of what is the biggest hard problem of science, consciousness. We actually don't know how the physical matter in our brains translates into thoughts and feelings. But this transcranial ultrasound is actually helping understand it. And you can stimulate different parts of the brains in ways you couldn't do before. And it actually gives people that transcendent feeling that you can sometimes only achieve through meditation. Wow. And it raises the possibility that we might actually be able to artificially enhance human perception to the point where everybody can have an enhanced consciousness that allows them to connect with, hopefully, this external field that a lot of highly advanced philosophers and maybe musicians and creatives and scientists are learning how to tap in as well. And it really struck me that, yes, we say that the mainstream's not covering it, but there is the beginning of peer-reviewed science looking at this idea of researching how consciousness works and how perception works. And I think we're very close to a major discovery. I think we're on the tipping point of developing an understanding about consciousness that might actually help us broaden the investigations into the use of things like meditation and relaxation as a way of helping humans deal with a whole lot of the problems that blight this planet.
Love it. And just to top it off and to finish up this conversation, I'd love to have you back in the future. I know you're a busy man with NewsNation and everything else you're doing and all the Conscious Life Expos and other expos around the world. But if all this is pointing to a greater reality beyond death and physical form, do you believe the UAP mystery may be preparing humanity for maybe something much bigger?
Well, every now and then I veer between optimism and downright pessimism.
Right.
I was being told by people in the Trump administration about a year ago that they were taking the issue extremely seriously and that they were toying with the idea of making some kind of limited disclosure. I'm increasingly skeptical that that's going to be the case. And I certainly don't think we're ever going to see any kind of official disclosure from government.
That's too bad.
What I think might happen, and I still don't think, for example, we've had an adequate explanation for these anomalous purported drone-like objects that have been seen all over the continental United States, all over the world, including Western Europe and the UK. Literally gigantic drone-sized objects that sometimes look like drones, sometimes look like aircraft, traveling at impossibly slow speeds, moving over sensitive civilian and military airspace and seemingly resistant to the most sophisticated counter unmanned aerial systems technology in the world. And you wonder, what is it that's been doing these displays over some of the most sensitive airspace on the planet? Nobody, including American generals, has been able to provide any explanation, none at all, for what these objects were or are. And that's a continuing mystery. And it does occur to me, is it possible that this is some kind of non-human intelligence technological show? Are they basically making it clear that they're not going to go away and putting a show on to make it clear to those in authority and government who do know that sooner or later they're going to have to make a revelation to the public? I sincerely hope that's the case, because I actually think the NHI have to force government's hand. Sadly, we're locked in a world now where we're moving inexorably, sadly, towards almost, I think, inevitable strategically, geostrategically international conflict. I worry about the likelihood of a thermonuclear war. I worry about conflicts becoming bigger, regional and international conflicts. It looks really grim right now for the planet. We're in a more dangerous period in human history than any time in the last 80 years since the Second World War. And what's interesting is we're not well served by a lot of the media that's reporting it, because it tends to dumb down and oversimplify and ignore the reality of what's happening. So I sincerely hope that if there is a non-human intelligence out there, it's listening to people like you and me, and it's going to do a show. I'd love it if they did manifest themselves. I don't think government's going to make any kind of overt announcement. There's a lot of optimistic speculation that there is going to be some kind of an announcement from Trump, and I'm not seeing any evidence of that at all. It's kind of sad, because I know there are people in the administration, notably people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is the Director of National Intelligence, Kash Patel, who's the head of the FBI. They're two people that have previously expressed great interest in studying non-human intelligence and whether it's engaging with this planet. And I know both of them have committed resources inside their organisations to investigating what it is that the United States government knows. But it appears to me that a decision has been made by somebody in the national security state to put a muzzle on them and anyone else. And it's kind of disappointing when you're seeing a high degree of, how does one say this, independent, rigorous thought by people in the administration that is cocking a snoot to previous practices and rules. It would be great to see them breaking the rules and revealing some of the UAP information that they have hidden away in a cupboard. But I'm not expecting that anytime soon.
I'm not either. And unfortunately, I'm sure if it was you or I, we would probably be yelling from the rooftops, but and I'm sure they probably want to also, but they probably put a muzzle on them as soon as they get into their position. So, but this conversation could go on, but I want people to go buy tickets, because coming up on February 20th through the 23rd, Ross is going to be at the Conscious Life Expo. He's going to be speaking about Deeper Answers, the UAP mystery, Saturday, February 21st from 2 to 3:30 p.m. in the room La Jolla. Get your tickets in advance. And also you can go to his Instagram, website, pretty much every place you can find him. Reality Check NN on Instagram, Ross Coulthart on Instagram, same thing on X. And then you said you have a new YouTube channel, Ross Coulthart Investigates. And what can people find on your YouTube channel? Same thing, what we're doing today?
It's literally brand new. I've only put it up in the last few days. But what you're going to see there is one of the things about network TV. It's good fun. I've worked in network TV for 35 years. But essentially, it's an opportunity for me to expand on what I do. In TV, if I do an interview that goes to air on NewsNation, there'll be maybe a 4-hour interview in some cases, and we'll put to air maybe 40 minutes of it.
Wow.
And so the idea is that it'll be a way for me to expand on stories and issues that I'm interested in, not just UAPs. It will also be an opportunity for me to showcase the kind of stories I've done in the past so that people know my work. I also find a lot of people are very interested in the process of investigative journalism. You know, all journalism should be investigative, but people are often asking me, you know, how do you do what you do? How do you even begin to investigate this kind of subject? And so I'm going to be doing a lot of that, you know, how-tos. I like the idea of sharing knowledge and helping people understand how to find out dirty secrets.
We love dirty secrets on Truth Be Told. But thank you, Ross, so much for what you do and putting all these years of effort, energy into the mysteries that have been unsolved. But I have a feeling that you're going to be contributing to the solution for many of these. So I appreciate you being on the show.
My very genuine pleasure, Tony. And thank you also to you and your viewers.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, speaking of viewers, for tuning in every Friday right here on Truth Be Told Paranormal on the Club Paranormal Network. We hope you guys come and join us every Friday for another amazing show with people like Ross. So until next time, take care of yourself and each other.